Well, international doctors and experts are in Sydney this weekend for a symposium on medical cannabis. They're aiming to educate the public on how cannabis can be used to treat illnesses such as epilepsy and breast cancer.
Alice O'Leary Randall's late husband Robert was the first person to legally receive medical cannabis in the United States, and she has since spent decades campaigning for its use to treat illness. And Alice O'Leary Randall joins us now. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us on Weekend Breakfast.
You're welcome.
Can I begin by getting a little background? I mean, this is some 40 years ago, I understand, when your husband Robert became the first person to legally use cannabis for medical purposes in the United States.
That's correct.
Can you just describe for us the situation, the circumstances, and I imagine the challenges around being recognised for that?
Yes, well, we became kind of accidental activists. Robert was diagnosed with glaucoma when he was 24 years old. He was told he'd be blind by the time he was 30. And he discovered quite accidentally that marijuana was lowering the intraocular pressures that were causing his blindness. We didn't tell anybody at the time, but we made it a point to have regular supplies of marijuana. We started to grow it, and we got busted. We honestly thought that nobody else in the world was aware that marijuana had medical value, but after we were arrested, we began to find out that there was indeed research to confirm his theory. We were fortunate enough to have researchers who could test him at that time. This was late 1975. And in 1976, he was found not guilty of the criminal charges against him by reason of medical necessity, based in common law. That catapulted him into the spotlight. A rather long-shot petition to get federal supplies of marijuana was successful, and the rest is 30 years, 40 years of history.
Well, and that brings us to today, and the medicinal benefits of cannabis are now well recognised. Yet, as we've seen, in so many jurisdictions, including Australia, it is illegal to use it. How frustrating is that for you?
It's extremely frustrating. Medical cannabis is not rocket science. We're not dealing with plutonium here. Medical cannabis has an extremely long history of use. It's only been in the last 5 to 7 decades that we've had this anomaly where we don't recognize its medical value. And there are people, as you've seen in this report, that are desperate to be able to access this legally. You shouldn't be criminalized to save your daughter's health.
Do you feel that indeed this is an additional burden that people are being faced with when they already are, faced with chronic illness and other issues? Of
course it is. If you have a child who's seizing, do you also have to be forced to be a gardener and make sure that their supplies of medicine aren't eaten by garden mites or something else? I mean, it's appalling that people are put into this position. They should be able to go to their physician, discuss the situation, and then go to a pharmacy and get pure cannabis that is safe and the dose that they need, the potency that they need.
So you're saying it's perfectly understandable that these people are willing to commit a crime in order to help themselves or their relatives?
Of course it is. I can't think of a single person, if their relative was facing death or disability and they knew that medical cannabis could help that person, I can't. If you could show me an individual who wouldn't do that for their loved one, I'd be really surprised.
And it has, been proven in terms of the science around this that medicinal cannabis offers effective treatment that other products simply can't offer.
I think that's true. It's fair to say that cannabis doesn't really cure things, but it can provide a better level of relief and from situations like spasms, for example, rather than take heavy-duty sedation medication. Cannabis can relieve the spasms and a person can lead a relatively normal life. Chemotherapy, cancer chemotherapy, it's a very effective and very quick medication for stopping the nausea and vomiting associated with cancer chemotherapy. It can help in a number of very serious disabling diseases.
How do people find out if it is beneficial to them, if it's the right thing? Because I would imagine that in some cases their doctors would be reluctant to recommend it.
I think that's the case. I think one of the things that's certainly driving the medical cannabis movement at this point is the Internet. The knowledge that's available on the internet is really amazing. And there's certainly word of mouth that's involved here. One person knows an aunt or an uncle who was successful with it, or a friend who was successful in using it. We are facing a time where we have a multitude of diseases that seem to be escalating because of the environment or whatever. And so people are looking for answers to their problems. Cannabis can be an answer.
What do you say to those who would argue that there's the potential for legalising medical cannabis to then flow on in terms of influencing recreational drug use and issues around that?
Well, I do think it's unfortunate that the two get blended together. And I would say that recreational cannabis use it's already out there. I don't think that medical cannabis is going to increase that in any way. In fact, in the United States, where we have, as you know, a number of states that have legalized cannabis for medical purposes, there's no evidence in those states that teenage drug use has increased, for example. There's no evidence in those states that there's been significant diversion. There is evidence in those states that opioid overdose deaths have been decreased by 25%.
Alice O'Leary Randall, thanks very much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.